Welcome to Wisconsin DNR's Wild Wisconsin Off the Record podcast. Information straight from the source.
Welcome back to another episode of Wild Wisconsin Off the Record. I'm your host, DNR's digital media coordinator, Katie Grant. Imagine it's a warm summer day. You're sitting on the edge of the lake relaxing, maybe reading a book. You look up long enough to notice an eagle soaring across the sky, and it seems everyone around you is also staring in awe. There's something about seeing an eagle that just makes everything stop. Bald eagles in Wisconsin and across the country used to be rarely seen and were on the verge of extinction, but they've made a comeback here in Wisconsin, and nests can now be found in 71 of our 72 counties. In just the last year, their numbers in the southeastern part of the state have grown by 27%. We asked our followers on Instagram what they wanted to know about this captivating bird, and you guys sure came through with the questions. We sat down with Rich Staffen, a zoologist and conservation biologist, working with our natural heritage inventory to learn a bit more about these raptors. So sit back and listen in.
So I am a zoologist and conservation biologist for the DNR in the Natural Heritage Conservation Program. Formerly, we were the Endangered Resources Program. So I work within a section of the Natural Heritage Inventory.
Okay.
So as the name implies, we do a lot of inventory or surveys throughout the state, and I focus largely on vertebrate species, so birds and raptors, reptiles and amphibians, and mammals, largely small mammals, and doing surveys or inventory around the state on public lands to help identify where some of our rare species are located, their distribution throughout the state, how they're doing, and then identify some really important or significant areas for rare species on state lands, state forests, state natural areas, state parks.
Okay.
So all this information gets built up into the Natural Heritage Inventory database, which I help add records to.
Okay.
And that's the central location for rare species and high quality natural community data that helps researchers and managers, and is the resource for environmental review to minimize impacts on rare species throughout the state.
Okay, so you spend a lot of time outdoors then?
Yeah, I get to spend, luckily, probably about maybe a quarter of my time, maybe a little bit more, out in the field doing surveys and monitoring rare species. And then also, like I mentioned, doing some adding information to this rare species database, so mapping and GIS.
Okay.
And entering data, tabular data for the database as well.
All right. I know you work with a lot of different things. What is your favorite thing to get out there and look for?
Yeah, people ask me that. That's a tricky question. I mean, I think I've started with birds and raptors, so that still holds a special place for me for sure. But I'm doing a lot more work with reptiles in particular, so snakes. I do a fair amount of work with some of our rattlesnake species primarily. We have a state endangered rattlesnake, the eastern Massasauga rattlesnake, and then some other uncommon or rare snakes, and do some turtle work, so I enjoy that a lot. And then I've started to get into some small mammal work for state properties, and it's always kind of exciting because it's kind of a new realm for me to learn more about small mammals and see some of those guys for the first time. Yeah, it's kind of fun.
So you mentioned working with raptors. And obviously we have you here today to talk about birds and eagles in particular. What first got you interested in eagles and raptors and that whole world?
Yeah, I think from the bird perspective, when I was getting my degree in wildlife biology, I spent a summer working in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, and that was my first kind of initiation to bird work. So I spent the summer chasing birds down there and watching how they nest and how productive they are in nesting down there for a PhD student at the time. And then once I got my position here with the Wisconsin DNR and focusing in the natural heritage inventory realm, I kind of, a lot of the work that we do, again, is for rare species. So we have several rare or uncommon raptor species that I got to work with, including the red-shouldered hawk, bald eagles, northern goshawk, so forest raptors, peregrine falcon, so several uncommon raptors. So I kind of got my feet wet working with some of those rare raptor species. And then at the time, bald eagles were still federally listed until 2007, so we were tracking how they were doing, of course, and doing the aerial surveys that we still do to this day, which is one of the longest running eagle surveys in the country.
Here in Wisconsin?
Yeah, it's over
Very
30
cool.
years that's been going on. So it's been going on for a very long time. And we got some great information and have kind of been able to monitor how the population has recovered.
Yeah.
So, and then kind of got on board with that, mostly through the data side of it, keeping track of the records of bald eagles for our rare species database. And then in the last 3 or 5 years, kind of getting to do some of the eagle flights as well, eagle and osprey flights in southwestern Wisconsin. So
Very
it's
cool.
been really fun.
Yeah, it sounds like it. While we're kind of on the topic, why don't you tell me a little bit about surveys? How do they work? What are you looking for? How do you actually do it?
Yeah, good question. So so it's been a long-running survey, like I said, and we do it via airplane surveys. So we're flying these nests. So we catch one of our DNR pilots, meet them at the airport. They take us up, and we come up with a route throughout our part of the state. So I work in southwestern Wisconsin. So we know where the nests that we want to look at are at initially. So we come up with a route of which makes the most sense for how we should fly it. Mm-hmm. And then once we approach a nest, we start to look. We have a GPS in the plane, and we kind of know that we're getting closer and closer. And then we can start looking for the nest. We usually do them pretty much before the leaves come out on the trees.
Okay, so in like early spring?
Yeah, so usually like March or April, we'll do our flights. These are the activity flights, the first one that we do, to see if the nest is active again for that season. And then, as we're approaching the nest, if it's in a deciduous tree, we can probably see them from like a half mile away.
Okay.
And we start to get closer and closer, and we try to see if the eagles are on the nest. Usually that time of year, they'll be incubating eggs. So we'll fly over probably within a couple 100 feet of the nest, and they'll just sit there, hunker down, watch us as we fly over. It doesn't really impact them at all. And we can tell then if the nest is active, if they're incubating, or we look for other signs to know if there might be eggs in the nest that we could see if they're not sitting on them, or if they're sitting nearby the birds, the adults. We know that it's probably active, or we can tell kind of by the way the nest looks as well, if it looks like it's been refurbished or updated for that nesting season, and if it's active or not. Or if sometimes the nest is gone and we got to try and find where they moved to for that season and see if there's a new nest nearby.
So sometimes they will come back to the same nest again. Other times they'll build a new one?
Pretty much they typically will reuse the same nest year after year.
Okay.
We call it they will refurbish it. So they'll add to it each year, kind of refresh the nest. So they'll add new sticks to it, some new nest lining, usually about sticks, probably about a foot, almost a foot worth of new sticks each year.
Deep?
Yep.
Okay.
Deep. Yep. So add on top of
So
it the height.
The height. Okay. Yeah.
Would be maybe about an inch or a foot or two added each year. Yeah. So the nests can get really large.
Yeah.
When they continually use them year after year, and they can last unless they get blown out of the tree or the tree falls down or something. The nests can last for 10, 15, 20 or more years.
Okay.
So they can get very large.
Yeah. How big around are they?
So when they start out, they're usually about 4 to 5 feet in diameter.
Okay.
So across, and usually about 3 or 4 feet deep from top to bottom.
Okay.
And then, yeah, like I said, they'll add on to that nest every year, so they can get very large.
Yeah, if you can see them from that far away, I would assume that they're pretty large.
Yeah. The tricky part is a lot of the nests end up being in conifers, like large pine trees.
Okay.
And those ones are kind of well hidden. So when you're doing the surveys, they're a little bit more tricky,
harder
difficult to see.
Yeah. Yeah. Where you mentioned the types of trees, where geographically kind of are we typically finding these nests? Are they in the middle of forests? Are they near the water? Where would they be?
Yeah, so they're found now pretty much statewide. Eagles are nesting in 71 of our 72 counties in the state, so they're pretty much, you can find one anywhere in Wisconsin.
Right, and Milwaukee is the one where we don't have
Milwaukee
any yet.
is the last county to have a known eagle nest.
Okay.
Yep. And then, they're typically near some kind of a water body, so a river or a stream or a lake or a pond, and they're usually pretty much really close to the water's edge.
Okay.
So I fly surveys along the Wisconsin River, which is a really good spot for eagles, and almost inevitably they're pretty much right on the edge of the river, in a large cottonwood or a large tree right at the edge of the water. And that's where we find them throughout the state, usually pretty close to those water edges. But we do find them, we're finding them now in cornfields and ag fields or along just a fence row, a narrow line of trees in the middle of an ag field. Usually there's some kind of a water body somewhat close by. So those are less frequent for sure, but they are showing up in some of those a little bit more isolated spots.
How many eggs are normally found in a nest?
Each year, they pretty much will nest every year. They only will have one brood. So if the initial nesting attempt fails, they will not re-nest again that year. But they'll typically lay 2 to 3 eggs. Okay. 2 is the average number of eggs that they usually lay. And they'll have 2 or 3 young in the nest. Typically, though, it's very uncommon that they would fledge 3 young. Usually it would be more like 2, or even more commonly, only one will survive to fledging the nest. Yeah.
Okay. I know with some birds, the male is really involved or the female is really involved. How is it with eagles?
Yeah. So both adults, the male and female, will help with building the nest, bringing sticks to the nest. And then actually both adults will incubate eggs. Typically, it's more the female. She spends much more time incubating the eggs, and the male will go off doing more of the hunting and bringing food back to the nest. But they do both take turns incubating eggs and incubating young as well throughout the nesting cycle.
Okay. And one question I hadn't really thought about but was asked via Instagram is, how can you tell the difference between a male and a female bald eagle?
Actually, you really can't tell the difference. There's no distinguishing characteristics between the male and the female of bald eagles. You can identify them to age. Okay. So they don't reach their typical adult plumage until they're 5 years of age. So they have various plumages through the ages of 1 through 4, and you can identify them based on that. Okay. So if a 1-year-old versus a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old. And then at age 5 is when they get their typical adult plumage with the white head and the white tail and black body.
I would say probably the most iconic, if you will, image of an eagle is it soaring over the water and kind of diving in to get a fish. Yeah. Obviously, they eat fish, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that all that they eat, or do they eat a lot of different things? And how does that work in the winter when maybe the nearest water body is frozen over?
Yeah. So in the summertime, fish makes up a large portion of their diet for sure. But in looking at photos and from people that have climbed nests, you'll find all kinds of different critters in there and remains of critters. So certainly fish, various species of fish. But you'll find turtle shells. We see carcasses of raccoons, muskrats make up a portion of their diet for sure. And then waterfowl too, some coots and other smaller ducks as well, usually injured or diseased ones or something like that. They would also prey upon. And then in the winter time, certainly they seek out open water areas, so that's why they congregate near dams and on rivers that remain open, like the Wisconsin River near Prairie du Sac Dam is a notorious or very famous place to see eagles in the wintertime because the dam churns up the water, churns up fish, and it also keeps the river open in that stretch. So a lot of eagles overwinter there, in addition to the protected bluffs in the lower Wisconsin Riverway that provide really good protected roosting locations to escape some of the cold and harsh conditions in the wintertime. So they'll eat fish on those open water conditions, but they also you'll find them out in ag fields eating some of the remains that farmers put out. And then also they spend a lot of time finding deer carcasses that might get hit by the deer that get hit by cars or get shot in the hunting season and are never found, or die of other causes. Eagles will survive on scavenging carcasses like that.
You mentioned overwintering. Do most bald eagles stay here year-round? Do they migrate? If they do migrate, where do they go?
Yeah, so in southern Wisconsin, a lot of our eagles here will stick around because the conditions are still suitable enough where they can find food, especially when there's a mild winter like this, when there's a lot of open water and they can access fish throughout the winter time. Some of the birds to our north, where the conditions are a little bit colder, snowier, icier, those birds will move south, migrate, but they're short distance migrants, so they'll only go as far as they need to go, and they'll just go down to southern Wisconsin or just south of Wisconsin into a little bit more favorable weather conditions. So they don't go a long ways. They'll just go as far as they need to. And so we'll have some of our resident birds stick around, but then we also, in southern Wisconsin, get birds from the north, northern Wisconsin, the UP, Canada as well, that'll come down here and take advantage of our little milder conditions.
Yeah. So you mentioned, obviously, near dams. What are some good places to look for eagles?
Yeah, so some of these large river systems with dams, locks and dams, like along the Mississippi River, is ideal because it keeps some of the waters open near those dams. The lower Wisconsin, like you said, Prairie du Sac, Sauk Prairie area, the dam there is a really good place. And there's going to be some eagle watching events focused on some of these phenomena where the eagles tend to congregate in the wintertime. So there's one coming up in Sauk Prairie later this month. Let me see, the dates is actually, for the one in Sauk Prairie is January 17th and 18th.
All right.
And then there's one along the Fox River. There's dams along there that stay open. That one's the following weekend, so January 25th through the 26th. And then there's several along the Mississippi River. The first one is late February 28th and 29th in Prairie du Chien. That's Bald Eagle Appreciation Days. There's one in Ferryville in early March. And then there's other opportunities up and down the Mississippi River, including in Alma, where you can get out and see eagles, eagle viewing.
What is your most memorable eagle experience?
I would say my first eagle flight was probably my most memorable. I wasn't sure what to expect. I was out with our former eagle biologist. He was in the front, I was in the back. I wasn't sure how my stomach was going to take flying. So yeah, it was just pretty spectacular to be up in the air and spotting these eagles that way. And then I just I think about flying along the course of some of these rivers, some of the smaller rivers where there's eagles nesting in the driftless area in southwestern Wisconsin, where you're in this plane flying low and just kind of maneuvering along the river. It just kind of felt surreal and kind of almost like a video game.
Yeah.
So it's kind of neat to, just be up there and see the eagles that way.
Beyond being a national symbol, what makes bald eagles so unique?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm always amazed at how into bald eagle watching, seeing bald eagles, people really are. And I think it's because, because they're so large and they're easily seen, and they're really easily to identify. So people can get frustrated with trying to identify other hawks or raptors or small birds. But eagles are large and really distinct in their plumage, and people can pretty easily identify them. So I think that goes a long way in people's interest in eagles for sure.
Do you have any bald eagle fun facts at all?
Yeah, I do have a few.
I was hoping you would.
So one of the cool things about them is their eyesight. So you've probably heard of eagle eye. So they actually do have amazing sight. So they can see probably 4 times as well as a human could see. So if an eagle was sitting, they could see like a running rabbit 3 miles away. So pretty far away.
Wow.
So like a person could never obviously see one that far away. So they have amazing eyesight, as you might suspect, which helps them in capturing prey.
Yeah.
They can also carry a remarkable amount of weight. So they usually typically weigh between 10 to 14 pounds themselves, and they can carry something up to a third or half of their body weight. So if they're carrying a stick, they could carry a pretty large stick to help build their nest, or they could carry a pretty large fish back to the nest. So that's pretty cool that they could carry something almost as large as they are. Yeah,
I guess if you're building a nest that's 4 feet wide, if all you have is like little tiny 2-inch sticks, that's going to take a lot of work and a lot of sticks to get that far.
Yeah. Yeah, and that reminds me, too, that we talked a little bit about how large the nests are, but we didn't mention, you've probably heard what we thought were wives' tales about how large they actually are, how much they weigh. So they actually can weigh a ton, like 2,000 pounds or more. So as they add layers on each year, they can get up to a ton or even well over a ton in weight. So being able to carry a stick that's a couple pounds actually comes in handy, because they need a large nest to be able to support that weight of them being in the nest and young as well. So
you guys also told us on Instagram that you wanted to know more about eagle habitat and how you can help support these conservation efforts. So we gave Carly Lapin a call to learn a bit more.
I work for Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources Bureau of Natural Heritage Conservation. I work as a regional ecologist based in Rhinelander, Wisconsin, which is in the north central part of the state. And I manage a number of state natural areas, as well as monitor and research non-game, rare, threatened, and endangered species.
Very cool. What first got you interested in this line of work?
I think I realized when I was in my late teens that I wanted to have a job that got me outdoors instead of sitting inside all the time. And that's really where it started. And just a passion for conservation and trying to take care of our natural heritage led me to pursue conservation biology and into this line of work.
Very cool. So we're here today to talk about eagles specifically. Why don't we just dive right into that? So everyone kind of knows that bald eagles were kind of disappearing. How bad was it really, like at the lowest point?
Well, eagles were threatened by a specific pesticide, DDT, which bioaccumulated or, increased in quantity as it moved up the food chain. And thus, because eagles are an apex predator, they were disproportionately affected, and it causes thinning of eggshells for all raptor species, not just for eagles. But basically, the eggs could no longer support the weight of adults when they were incubating and caused nest failures. And so, by the time we had figured out what was causing these declines in population, the eagle numbers were down to under 500 pairs in the lower 48 states.
Wow.
And that was in the early 60s.
All right. How do we have a feel for how few were left in Wisconsin around that time?
We started monitoring bald eagles in the 1970s in Wisconsin, and our lowest record was 108 pairs.
Okay. And how many do we estimate we have here today?
In 2019, here in Wisconsin, our annual bald eagle nest survey documented 1,684 occupied nests, so that's 1,684 pairs. But there are many more than that in the state on an annual basis if you include juveniles and subadults, as well as adult eagles that either don't have a pair or don't have a nesting territory.
Wow, so they've really, really made a comeback here.
Yeah, they have increased a lot in Wisconsin.
And do we expect that number to keep going, or are we nearing a point where it's probably going to level off, or where are we kind of with that?
Well, we've thought for a number of years now that the numbers would start to level off, but they have continued to increase, and we are expecting them to, level off now at this point.
Okay. How long does a bald eagle tend to live in the wild?
Bald eagles can live up to 30 years in the wilds. There have been individuals that have lived longer, and they can live longer in captivity, but 30 is kind of the consensus for a long-lived eagle.
All right. And so obviously as an apex predator, it's pretty high in the food chain. What is the biggest cause of death for them?
In Wisconsin, our natural resource professionals kind of agree that vehicle mortality is the leading cause of eagle death in Wisconsin, and this is related to roadkill consumption. So they in Wisconsin they scavenge quite a bit, and we see them on deer carcasses frequently. And because they need a lot of space to get off the ground to fly, they tend to fly over the roadway and can easily be hit by cars.
That makes sense. A lot of what you do here for us is actually working to repair eagle habitat at our state natural areas. What is kind of the ideal habitat for a bald eagle?
Bald eagles are really reliant on their nesting habitat for reproduction, and that consists of large, we call them super canopy trees, so trees that stick above the tree canopy or are taller. And those in proximity to water are important for nesting eagles.
What can we do, for example, on those public lands to improve that habitat for them?
It's, I would say, not so much of an improvement of habitat. It's just maintaining the habitat that's available and making sure that we're retaining our large legacy trees, we call them, or super canopy trees, and especially protecting any known nests that we've documented.
Beyond kind of keeping an eye on those big trees and, kind of leaving the nests alone, if you will, is there anything that residents can do to improve their property to attract nesting eagles?
Again, we like to retain the trees that they like to use for nesting to keep their options open and have that habitat be available. It's really important for eagles to avoid disturbing them during the nesting season. So this is important if you are going to be harvesting trees, to not be harvesting trees near a nest during the nesting season. So typically that's late winter through August, July or August. And they can be, very sensitive to disturbance, some pairs more so than others. But if they are disturbed too much, they can actually abandon their nest for the year. So one important thing that I hear about a lot is fireworks during 4th of July can be very disruptive to eagles. And usually in July, the fledglings are large enough that they, will maybe try to fly out of the nest but aren't able to fly yet, and so they can be injured. if they're frightened by fireworks.
We have eagles throughout most of the state, right? Are there areas in terms of parts of the state where we have a lot more of them versus fewer in other parts?
Yes. We have the fewest number of nesting eagles in the southeast part of the state, and this is, I think, largely related to higher human population densities and less available habitat in that part of the state. Milwaukee County is our only county currently where we don't have any documented eagle nests. Contrary to that, we have our highest densities of eagles nesting in Oneida and Vilas County, which also happens to be our highest lake density in the state. So that those lakes with forest around them are the prime habitat for eagles, and that's where we see our highest numbers as well.
Perfect. That was kind of where I was getting at, was going to be, you would think Milwaukee County, you have the lake right there. You would think that there would be a good likelihood of finding one there, but I guess it makes sense that the human population density there would be a good reason for it to not be high in that area.
Yeah, and we actually, too, our Great Lakes are not necessarily prime habitat for eagles. They tend to do better on our smaller lakes.
Okay.
So for whatever reason, we do have nests along Lake Superior as well, and those eagles don't tend to do as well as our inland eagles. It could be weather related, or potentially they just don't, there's too much area to cover to get food. So fish resources may not be as readily available on the big lakes.
That makes sense. How can Wisconsinites get involved in supporting these conservation efforts in the state?
So in supporting bald eagles in particular, Wisconsinites can get involved by reporting eagle nests. We do have a way to do this. In recent years, our citizen scientists have found a number of new nests for our records. So that's one way. There's also an Adopt an Eagle Nest program where you can make a contribution to the Eagle program, and in return, you get to adopt an eagle nest. We send you a picture of an eagle nest and the location, and so that's a way to support it as well. More broadly, to support the Endangered Resources Program or Natural Heritage Program, you can donate money to the Endangered Resources Fund, either directly or through a tax checkoff on your income taxes, and also through the Eagle license plate program. So we do have 2 license plates that are program issues that support the work that we do. One of them is the wolf plate, and our new one is the eagle plate. And you can find out more about that on the DNR website by searching eagle plate.
Perfect. What are the big takeaways from this conservation success story, and how can we apply those to other conservation work that we're doing here at the DNR, or maybe even that, for example, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is doing at the higher level, or maybe even smaller groups are doing on the local level?
Sure. Eagles are one of the big success stories in the history of conservation in our country. And I think for me, the big takeaways are that the threat to eagles was largely one specific cause, so the use of DDT. And once we had identified that, it was pretty easy to reverse the impacts by removing the use of that contaminant in our day-to-day lives. That's an important takeaway because in my experience, most of our at-risk species are not threatened by one specific identifiable thing. It's often many different factors, and they can be hard to identify and parse out, and in many cases even harder to address. So I think, identifying the things that are easy to change and that are easy to identify is important, and addressing, kind of the lower hanging fruit in many of these cases is an important takeaway from this experience.
Can't get enough eagle facts and want even more? Visit dnr.wi.gov and search bald eagle for Wisconsin-specific facts, eagle watching events, and details about the Endangered Resources Fund, eagle license plates, and more. Have a question you'd like to hear answered by one of our experts on a future episode? Email us, dnrpodcast@wisconsin.gov. Thanks for listening.